Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Tonight is 5th of Jumad al-Ula, 1438, 1st of February 2017. Chapter 21 from the book Al-Mufid. What has been related concerning going beyond bounds over the graves of the righteous, causing them to become idols worshipped instead of Allah.
Right.
Note.
Okay, got another one.
Note on the title, 57. This chapter is connected to the one that came before it and going beyond bounds concerning the graves of the righteous until they become an idol that is worshipped besides Allah, that is, the grave or the person in it is worshipped. And by righteous, what is meant is the prophets, alayhimus salam, and the allies and friends of Allah, awliya, and even from those less than them. As regards his saying idols, awthan, then the meaning of idols is everything that is worshipped, that worship is directed towards. Meaning of idol is everything that worship is directed towards. His saying worship besides Allah means other than Him, whether that which is worshipped is done so alone or alongside Allah. It is compulsory to single Allah out for worship, and it is affirmed in Hadith Qudsi that Allah the Exalted says, I am so self-sufficient that I am in no need of having partners. Therefore, whoever does an action for me and other than me, I will abandon it and his polytheism. Sahih Muslim.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وعلى من تبع هداهم إلى يوم الدين. As we have just heard or listened to the chapter title, the title which is, he said, it is linked to the title which is before it. That is the ghulu. Ghulu means going overboard. And in the chapter before, we said that the ghulu is not right, and the ghulu also of ranks. Some of the ghulu goes so extreme that it will reach that the person would be committing shirk. Some of that ghulu would make the person reach a level of bid'ah. So if we know that the ghulu is going overboard, that is overboard, the board which is the board that indicate the limitation that we should not pass beyond it. So, in terms of going overboard regarding the graves, that is the graves in terms of their looks. So, for example, how high that would be built. For example, what sort of decoration it would be put on top of it. What sort of writings that will be given on top of it. And the Prophet ﷺ, from his sunnah, that is, he had prohibited all those things that would lead to that shirk. Because when you go overboard, then that will reach you to the shirk in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whether the grave is of a person who is a righteous or a person who is not a righteous, both graves should be the same. They should know distinguishing between a grave of a sheikh or a grave of a sheikh, a grave of a prophet or a grave of no prophet. We should not, for example, put the turban of the sheikh on top of his grave to indicate that he was a sheikh. And then the people will refer to him fatwa even after his death. That is not allowed. So, Prophet of Allah, he prohibited writing onto the grave. Those writings which is happening these days that would lead later on to going overboard. So, writing on top of the grave. And the writing is only for necessity. So if, for example, your deceased or the one who died is got a special name, that with his first name you could distinguish him from all the people in the grave, then there's no need to put the father's name. So it is enough for us to put, for example, Al-Qa'qa'. And how many Al-Qa'qa' in the graveyard? Maybe the only one, if it's his name. But if his name is Muhammad or his name is Abdullah, lots of Muhammad and Abdullah. So you add the son of so and so, his father, in order to distinguish that that grave belonged to that family. So that grave, when it is being having the writing, it is only for the sake of the relatives that they would know where is the grave is. So the grave, in terms of the writing of it, is not for other people to come and have a picnic and look at the grave and sort of read the names and start scanning. And it's not for that. It's for the people who are relatives to come and come to the grave of their relatives and to make dua. And that dua is to be beneficial from the person who comes to the grave, not vice versa. So the grave does not give you benefit. It is you who gives the benefit to the grave. So that is why the Prophet of Allah also, he had prohibited the slaughtering next to the grave, writing on top of the grave, raising the grave, and all of that. Because it will go overboard. When something goes overboard, then it will lead to the shirk in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Here he says, يُصَوِّرُهَا أَوْثَانًا, that this going overboard regarding the grave, it will make it awthan. Awthan, anything that worship beside Allah. It's nothing to do with just statues, because awthan in Arabic, idols. And idols, always when we think about idols, is worshipping statues, worshipping stones. No, idols is everything that you could take. Even the alcohol is an idol. Prophet of Allah said, مُدْمِنُ الْخَمْرُ كَعَابِدِ وَثَنٍ. The person who addicted to the alcohol, he is like an idol worshipper. So the idol worshipping is not just a statue. And you know that lots of graves, they don't have a statue on top of them, yet they have themselves been taken as an idol. Where people, they go there and they offer their prayers and they ask the person inside and they ask him for help and benefits and all of that. So that is why the author here, he meant it makes it awthan, regardless of whether it is there's a shrine on top of it or there is no shrine, whether there's a statue on top of it or no statue. So ghulu in the graves, in way of distinguishing that grave in any way, in any form, then it will lead to the shirk in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? It will make it things that will be worshipped beside Allah. Beside Allah, that means beside Allah, that is, it is the God itself without Allah, or beside Allah, that is along with Allah. Both are correct. So it will be worship that is beside Allah, meaning Allah is not there. It will be the gods, or they will take it as intercessors. Like the mushrikeen, they used to take their idols as intercessors. Now, the qubur has rights upon us. The rights upon us regarding the grave is that we should not disrespect them. And at the same time, we should not go overboard. And one hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he had summed up all of that. He said, verily, لا تصلوا إليها ولا تجلسوا عليها. Don't pray towards it and do not as well step on top of it. So here, لا تصلوا إليها. Don't pray to it. That is extreme of reverence, extreme of going overboard of the respect. Do pray towards it. ولا تجلسوا عليها. And don't sit on it. That is from the other side, which is the humiliation. So it's both are to be ghulu. Ghulu in extremism, going overboard, which is in respect, and here going overboard in disrespect. All of that is prohibited. And we know that the hadith that the doctor has just recited just now, the hadith which is in Sahih Imam Muslim, hadith Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu anhu to Abu al-Hayyaj al-Asadi, that he said, ألا أبعثك على ما بعثني به أو عليه رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Should I send you and command you with what the Prophet of Allah commanded me with? It looks like the answer would be saying yes. He said yes because he said yes because this is an introduction or elucidation for something which is coming important. It is like to pull the attraction of the person. Shall I tell you what the Prophet of Allah told me? You're going to tell him that, but you're going to say to him that that's how important it is, and the Prophet of Allah told me that, and that is why I'm telling you this. Because the Prophet of Allah loves me, and he told me this, and I love you as well, and I told you that. So, أَلَّا تَدَعَ تِمْثَالًا إِلَّا طَمَسْتَ. That you will not come to a timthal. Timthal means a statue, except that you will طَمَسْتَهُ. That means you have disfigured it in such a way, it will not make it as a wathan, as a statue. So, for example, if the statue is a 3-dimension, so you break the head, or at least you take the figures of the head and you turn it like a tree. If you take the figures of the head, there's no eyes, there's no nose, there's no mouth, it becomes like what? A tree, branch of tree. And if it's a drawing, then you will use the drawing. So, Sheikh Al-Albani will taught us how, for example, the cross, how to make another cross, to make a thumbs to it, to make it, just to make something that, like if it's got a cross there, if you join these two together, and then it becomes like a alpha, beta, gamma, you know the alpha, if you know, I don't know if you know chem, physics. So if you just do something to it, and then it will become, Prophet of Allah, he did not even leave a cross on top of a carpet, except that he will take it away, he will put it up. And it's a cross, even worse than that, which is a statue, an image. So any picture, you will first of all cut off the head, because the head is the picture. So you left the head on its own, that's a picture. If you left the head without any configurations, then that's accepted. So if you have no nose, no eyes, so the person looks like a circle, that's no problem, inshallah. But once you put the shapes in it, then it becomes a picture. And the Prophet ﷺ, he had Jibreel coming to him, and he said to him that if you pass by a statue, then make it to a tree. So make it into a tree shape. And then he says, on top of that, قال ولا قبرا مشرفا إلا سويته. Not مشرفا, by the way. مشرفا إلا سويته. مشرفا, that means it is high. A grave which is higher than what it's supposed to. A grave supposed to be like a handstand raised up above the ground with the hump which is in the middle. And that is the hump to make sure that the people know it's a grave. There's no harm to put a brick if it's needed, because, for example, let's say in some of the countries, the flood and the water and the rain would wash out that hump. But if there is no need, like in this country, there is no need. There is no need for that brick. Once you put the hump, subhanAllah, the grass on top of it will make it what? Intact. Will make it together. So you don't need that brick around that grave. So the brick is only needed when it will only be permissible if it is needed. If it's not needed, you're not supposed to put it. And you look at the graves in the Baqi' al-Gharqad. Nothing there, it's just what? Humps, isn't it? Just humps. And then the hump is called the shahid. The shahid means here, the stone that is being put for the head, and you could put a stone as well to the foot. So the head, because there is no difference between the head and the feet in terms of respect. So you can't just sit on the feet and then sit on the foot and the face. That's not right. Sitting on top of the head is equivalent to sitting on the feet side. You're not allowed to sit on it. For really, the Prophet of Allah, he said, he who sits on a piece of coal, burning his clothes, going into his skin, better than sitting on a grave. لأن يجلس أحدكم على جمرة تحرق ثيابه فتخلص إلى جلده خير له من أن يجلس على قبر. So to sit on a piece of coal, burning his clothes, going onto his skin, better than to sit on a grave. That's how we should respect the grave. From the disrespect of the grave, that these people come to the grave with a cigarette in their mouth. SubhanAllah. This is a place where you should be reminding yourself of how you should be closer to Allah Azza wa Jalla, and that I'm going to die. This person is drinking or he is smoking. Same for me. Drinking alcohol or smoking cigarettes is the same. You have no respect whatsoever. If that is not going to remind you of the grave, the thing that would remind you, that who's going to remind you? Which one is going to give you a shake and a shock to wake you up? So he said to him, shall I inform you of what the Prophet of Allah had informed me? Any statue to disfigure it, to take the figuration of it, and also any qabr, any grave which is high, to put it down and make it level. To make it level here is not make it level to the ground, make it level is not as high as it's supposed to be. And the word here, as-salihin, salihin, all those righteous. And it's a very wide word here, salih. It includes the prophets and it includes also the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right, and after this, alhamdulillah, we're going to come to, says, by the way, talking about the min dunillah, you know that the Prophet ﷺ said, أَنَا أَغْنَى الشُّرَكَاءَ عَنِ الشِّرْكِ. I am the most, Allah said, I am the most sufficient from having a partner. He who does any deed and then he participated someone or something with me, I will leave him and his shirk. And that is why the author said that these graves are being taken as idols, worship beside Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Go ahead.
The Prophet ﷺ said,
Does it say Malik, Muwatta Malik? That's not good. That's chucking out things which are important. Go ahead.
The Prophet ﷺ said, O Allah, do not let my grave become an idol that is worshipped. Allah's wrath is immense upon the people who took the graves of their prophets as places of worship.
I'm going to read that in Arabic as well, because as I said, the English had chucked out things which are very important in the explanation. روى مالك في الموطأ أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال اللهم لا تجعل قبري وثنا يعبد اشتد غضب الله على قوم اتخذوا قبور أنبيائهم مساجد. Now,
the note on the hadith is first is authenticated by Shaykh Al-Bani rahimahullah
that's it.
And Abdul Qadir Arnaout, and he's saying sallallahu alaihi wasallam took the graves of their prophets as places of worship, that is, placed them as masajid, either by building over them or by praying at them. So both of these things are taking them, the graves, as masajid. And as regards the question, did Allah answer the dua of His Prophet ﷺ concerning that? The response is that Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah said, indeed Allah answered this dua. However, he did not mention that his grave is protected by 3 walls, so that no one can pray towards it, so that they make it an idol worship besides Allah. Additionally, we have not heard anything historically regarding it being taken as an idol throughout history.
You know what amazes me here? This is not from Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen. This has been added. The book is not Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen's book now. So, right, okay, doesn't matter. Well, we made a wrong choice of that book. I mean, a wrong choice of that version of that book. And it's not really representing Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen. He chucked out Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen and then adds from his own pocket. طيب. Al-Muwatta is a great book. It is for Imam Malik rahimahullah. It's a higher isnad than Al-Bukhari, but no way it is as sahih as Al-Bukhari. Al-Muwatta, it has 3 things. Number 1, the hadiths of the Prophet of Allah. It has number 2, the athar of the companion. Number 3, it has also some of the fiqh of the Imam Malik himself. And he here mentions a hadith which is hadith mursal, and the mursal means that the Sahabi says it from the companions, and there is no mentioning the companion itself, from the follower to the Prophet. There is no mentioning of the Sahabi, and that's called mursal. And here the mursal of most of the mursal of Muwatta Imam Malik is to be sahih, but this one is being connected by others, and Shaykh Al-Albani, as he said, he makes it sahih rahimahullah. A number of his books, one of them is Mishkat al-Masabih. In this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, Allahumma la taj'al qabri wathanan yu'bad. Allahumma la taj'al qabri wathanan yu'bad. That is, O Lord, do not make my grave as a statue to be worshipped, to be an idol worshipped. اشتد غضب الله, the anger of Allah has gone increased or bigger. على قوم اتخذوا قبور أنبيائهم مساجد, upon people who have taken the graves of their prophets as to be places of worship. Right, now the Prophet ﷺ, he had made a supplication. That supplication of the Prophet of Allah, it has been fulfilled in terms of, that is, there is no way for any person to go to the grave of the Prophet of Allah because he can't see it, and it is being surrounded by 3 walls. And it's being surrounded by 3 walls. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in terms of the protection of the Prophet of Allah, in terms of the grave wise, there is a protection. But there is no protection from taking the Prophet himself as an idol. For very little people say, Ya Allah, Ya Muhammad. Even there is no grave, but they say, Ya Allah, Ya Muhammad. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had, according to Ibn Qayyim rahmatullahi alayhi, had responded to the Prophet ﷺ by making the grave of the Prophet so protected by 3 walls. And you know that other graves, you'll find it that they've been taken as graves, these graves have been taken as idols beside Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the fitna regarding the shirk of the graves to be respected and taken as places of worship, it has been enlarged and increased. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he says, كيف أنتم? How about you? إذا لبستكم فتنة, if fitna got onto you, قال يربو فيها الصغير ويهرم فيها الكبير. The young will get older and the older will get more older. حتى يتخذه الناس السنة, till the people takes that fitna as a sunnah. فإذا غيرت قالوا غيرت السنة. If the sunnah, if that bid'ah is to be changed, they will say the sunnah has been changed. And what more fitna that we could take as an example of what Abdullah ibn Mas'ud had said, as the example of the grave. For verily, the graves are a big fitna where led lots of people and nations away from the haqq and made them to worship other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he had prohibited in his reign of his khilafah to follow any of the Prophet's things that would lead to shirk. So he commanded for the tree of the Ridwan, under which the companions had made the pledge to be cut. So why he cut it? Because the people used to direct that tree or target that tree to worship and pray underneath. And even we have a narration that Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu warda, he had prayed in a place which is in the path to Mecca or to the Mecca, the prayer of the Fajr. And they've seen the people going to different places. He said, where are they going, these people? They said, oh, leader of the believers, they're going to places where the Prophet of Allah used to pray. He said, verily, the people before you were destroyed. They used to take the traces of the prophets are to be places of worship. So whoever comes to any place and there is the time of the prayer, then let him pray, for verily, the Prophet of Allah, he said, جُعِلَتْ لِيَ الْأَرْضُ طَهُورًا. And حيثما أدركتني الصلاة صليت. Wherever I go, that you could go and this is you've got. So the earth is for you, place of worship and place of purification. So you've got your sajjada, your prayer mat with you, and you've got what? Your wudu. Wherever you are, you've got your wudu, and you've got what? Prayer mat, because you don't need a prayer mat. You can pray on any floor, as long as it is not a graveyard, as long as it's not a camel stable, as long as it is not a toilet. And as for the water, if you don't have water, you have a land to purify yourself with tayammum. There was a story as well, which is from Abu al-Aliya, one of the great followers. He says that when we have conquered one of the lands which belongs to the Persians, and we have went inside to the treasury, and the treasury for Hormuzan, we've seen a man there, a dead person, and next to him a Quran. So we took that Quran, the Mus'haf, and we took it to Umar al-Khattab, and that Quran, which is not in Arabic, I'm sorry, I should say Mus'haf, it's like a scroll of Quran. We took it to Umar al-Khattab, and al-Khattab commanded Ka'b ibn Mati' to come and translate that, because it was in Hebrew. So he said, Abu Ali, I was the first man from the Arab to read that, and I recited it. So I said, one of the people said, Abu Ali, what is in it? He said, in it there are lots of things, and lots of what you're going to do, and expectations. So I said, so what did you do to the man? He said, well, we have dug 13 holes, and we put the man during the night in one of those holes, and then we covered them, so in order to make the people not aware which grave he was in it. Because that man, they say that every time the rain is not there, they will bring his bed, okay, and they will be sent the rain. So he asked him, who do you think is that man? He said, verily it is Daniel. You heard about Daniel from the Bani Israel. It is Daniel. And he was, they said in the story that verily he was not changed. He was there just like the martyr is being observed. Allahu A'lam. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah narrates the story. Can you just keep that microphone away from me because there's a gain and it's giving me a headache. There's a gain from it. Oh, sorry. Now Faisal, can you just put that microphone down? Is it giving a bit more? So Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he says that in this story that the Muhajirun and the Ansar, they did the same thing to the Prophet's grave. They did not put it up. That is why Aisha said, لَوْلَا ذَلِكَ لَأُبْرِزْ. Had it been for that, his grave would have been shown. That's why they did not want to show it to anybody. So they put it in the room of Aisha and where he died. And that's because of Abu Bakr. He said, I heard from the Prophet of Allah, where the graves of any Prophet dies, he will be buried where he dies. And because of the second reason we have said that before, if you remember, because of that would lead to shirk. So you know that if the grave of the Prophet of Allah was shown, there would be a fight for it. There would be a fight for it. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he had also mentioned that, and he said, any person going to any certain place where he hoped there is good into it, and the Sharia, the Islam, did not come to encourage such a thing, then this is from the thing that you should really deny, and we should reject whether this person went for the intention to pray there or to call Allah, in that place, or for example to recite some verses, or to remember Allah Azza wa Jal, or to do some, for example, slaughtering or any type of ibadah. All of that is being prohibited and denied by the Sharia. So, if the person went to a grave just for the sake of the visit, for him to benefit the grave, not to get benefit from the grave, then the intention will make it correct. So when you visit the graves, it's no problem, because you want to visit the grave for the sake of to supplicate to them, and also to benefit yourself from the visit that is from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, not from the dead himself. But to seek the dua, then you think that dua will be responded to, this is going to lead you to shirk. Right. Also, Prophet of Allah, he said here, اشتد غضب الله. The anger of Allah has gone increased. Ishtadda means increased, gone more stronger. The wrath and the anger. The anger of Allah is one of His attributes. And the anger of Allah is suitable to His majesty. And I don't like to go into the fact what is the difference between our anger and the anger of Allah Azza wa Jalla, because as I said a number of times, we know that all the attributes of Allah are suitable to His majesty. When we start to compare the attributes of Allah with our attributes, we are belittling Allah Azza wa Jalla. So we suffice ourselves with the verse, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. Our Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he had rather gone to the differences between the ghadab, the anger of us, and the anger of Allah Azza wa Jalla. And as I said, that is, we don't need to say it, but if, for example, you're having a debate or you're having an explanation to somebody who's already has the Ash'ariya aqidah in him, or the Jahmiya aqidah in him, or the Mu'tazila aqidah in him, or the Rafida aqidah in him, all of those aqidah, they don't really attribute to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the ghadab. Some of them, they make it ta'wil. Ghadab means intiqam, means the vendetta, or we call it the revenge of Allah. But no, say ghadab Allah is suitable to His majesty. And he says here, rahimahullah, Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah, that verily the ghadab, in terms of the difference between the human being and Allah, that the human being ghadab is a boiling of the heart's blood. So the blood goes, hot and hot inside the heart, and it's like a piece of coal that the shaitan throws into the heart of son of Adam, until that blood will go boiling. As for the anger of Allah Azza wa Jal, it's an attribute, there's no similarity to it. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. So the ghadab, the anger of the human being, it will give and it will motivate him to do something which is bad. So when he's, for example, angry, He would do things that he would regret later on. So he might kill the person who has got anger on top of him or onto him. And maybe he would divorce his wife, or he would maybe break the pot, or whatever. As for the anger of Allah Azza wa Jal, then there is nothing of that will happen except only good things, because He's the All-Wise. So the ghadab would entail Allah to do something which is the correct one, not like the human being. Ghadab Allah, it is not like the ghadab al-makhluqi. Not in the reality of it, the essence of it, nor in the impacts of it. So, ghadab Allah is a perfection to Him, whereas a ghadab of the human being is imperfection. Imperfection means it is something that would make the person not good. Right, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَمَّا آسَفُونَا انْتَقَمْنَا مِنْهُمْ. When we had, Allah لَمَّا آسَفُونَا, when they had made us angry, we took revenge from them. So here, the two words are different. Angry and what? Revenge. In Surah Al-Zukhruf, verse 55. Right, now, we take from this as well, the third one, what is? That the anger of Allah has gone more onto the people who take in the graves of the prophets as to be places of worship. Places of worship, either we said, by building a masjid on top of it, or putting or burying the grave into the masjid, or praying next to the grave. It's all of that. So, three things here. Either that this person will build a grave on top of the masjid, will put it inside the masjid, or he will build a masjid on top of the grave, or he will be praying next to the grave. All of that is to be prohibited. Right, so in this hadith, we find that the prohibition of building on top of the graves, prohibiting of the prayer next to it, and all of that from the kaba'ir. Right. In this, and I would like to add as well, the scholars like Imam Malik rahimahullah had disliked the word to say ziyarat qabr al-Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is to make a ziyarah. Ziyarah means what? A visit to the grave of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah brings this issue, and he says that the ziyarah, that why it is being disliked by those imams, because the ziyarah which is intended here is the ziyarah which is full of bid'ah. Is there somebody here? We're going to come in. Ziyarah al-bid'ah. So the ziyarah, when we talk about the ziyarah to the Prophet ﷺ grave, is different from the ziyarah to the normal grave, isn't it? Well, ziyarah to the grave, normal grave. Well, ziyarah is normal one. But when you go to the Prophet or any other place which is to do with religion, you'll find that it is connected to the what? To the bid'ah, always. Because it will be going to the person to ask him for benefit and making dua to him, or dua next to him, or to make remembrance of Allah. So ask him to fulfill things. So, for example, ziyarah al-Jilani, ziyarah al-Badawi, ziyarah al-Hussein, and all of those shrines that these people, they say ziyarah, they mean the ziyarah which is what? A mubtadi'ah ziyarah. Ziyarah which is full of bid'ah. And that is why Imam Malik, he disliked that word, and he said, we say, no, it's passing salutation upon the Prophet. That is what it's supposed to be. So when you go to the grave, you will say what? To pass your salam to the Prophet, not to make ziyarah. So that word ziyarah, and I agree that Shaykh said, this is, rahimahullah, a very important issue. That sometimes if the word is right, but it's got implementation of it, not good, not to be used. Do you understand that? So if there's a word is good, but the implementation of it is not good, not to be used. And that is why we don't use the word jism. You know about Allah Azza wa Jism. Jism means what? Body. Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah, he says, we don't negate, nor we what? Affirm. Because when these people, they say, he's got no jism. We want to understand, what do they mean by the word jism? When they negate it, he's got no jism. Is it no essence? So hold on, stop. There is got an essence. Because the jism for them is the body, the essence. As for us, when we say the word jism, we're not allowed to say it, because Allah did not describe himself to be jism, nor the Prophet of Allah. So we don't really use that word, because Allah did not use it, the Prophet did. But at the same time, we don't negate it. Because these people who says it, negate it, they are actually taking Allah from inexistent. To be inexistent Allah. So they're worshipping something which does not exist. يعبدون عدما, as Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah said. So when the Prophet ﷺ, he said, ألا إني قد نهيتكم عن زيارة القبور ألا فزوروها. I have prohibited you from visiting the graves. Now visit them. فإنه يذكركم الآخرة. For verily it will remind you of the hereafter. Prophet of Allah, he came in a visit to whom grave? To his mother's grave. And who's that? Kafir. So when you go and visit even the graveyards of the kuffar rather than you are in the hadith. So when the Prophet says, ألا فزوروها, visit the graves, whether it's Muslim or what? Or non-Muslim. Same thing. To visit the graves, it reminds you of what? Of the akhirah. Gives you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't mean to go and seek help. You can't seek help from the kuffar, can you? So it's not for seeking help from the kuffar. So that is why the word ziyarah for the Prophet of Allah, I would not use that word. No, I'm going to go to past salutation onto the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As for the ziyarah, is attached to something which is not right. Allah ta'ala a'lam. There's an addition here from Shaykh Salih al-Shaykh. He says, Habibullah, this hadith, it is very clear that the grave, it could be a idol. And the Khurafiyun, the ones who are like Sufis and all of that, they say that the qubur, the graves cannot be idols. And the idols are the ones who are the people at the time of pre-Islam, Jahiliyyah, used to worship. We say to them to refute their argument. We say, for verily, the Jahiliyyah, they used to hook themselves to stones and trees. Okay? And they have seen that those trees and those stones that would make them to, go higher and to be interceding with them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So those people taking the stones, and there's nothing benefit in the stones. So we say that the graves of the righteous people have more priority to avoid them. Because the person have more inclination to make a grave of a righteous man as an idol more than taking what? A tree or a stone. True or not? A tree or a stone, not. Very few people these days will take a tree. People, they might be, I'm saying. But graves of righteous are more of a priority to be warning against them. We don't say, these Sufis, no problem to go to the graves and no problem to go and ask because we're not going to make them as an idols. You're wrong. This is even more of a danger to the Muslim ummah, the graves, rather than the stones and the jinns and, and trees and all of that. So, the tools or the ways to shirk in the graves is much more clear than the ways of making shirk through the stones. And both of them, they are having the common thing, which is that make them idols beside Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When the mushrik were asked, why do you worship these stones? ما نعبدهم إلا ليقربونا إلى الله زلفى. We don't worship them except that they will get us closer to Allah. هؤلاء شفعاؤنا عند الله. These are the ones who are intercessors for us beside Allah. So that the people who are these days now at the moment, when we ask them, why do you go to such and such grave? They will say, yes, because that person, he gives us a cure. Every time we go and make application next to that grave, we are granted what we have asked for. And that is what the people would do regarding the graves of those people whom they hold them to be holy men. Right, going now to Ibn Jarir, rahimahullah.
Ibn Jarir, rahimahullah, reports on the authority of Sufyan from Mansur, from Mujahid, that he said, the verse of Surah Al-Najm, verse 19 and 20, translation in English, have you seen Al-Lat and Al-Uzza and another Manat, the third god? He, Al-Lat, used to prepare sawir for the pilgrims, and when he died, the people began to sit at his grave. Likewise, Ibn al-Jawzi narrates from Ibn Abbas.
No.
He narrates from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma that he said, he, Allah, used to prepare sawir.
Allah.
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 Only for Allah, the lamb is
Allah.
Only Allah. Everybody, muraqqaq lamb.
Lat.
Al-Lat, yes.
Lat. He, Lat,
Yes.
used to prepare sawiq for the pilgrims. The note on Lat was a man that was worshipped by the polytheists in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. They used to say he was a good man who prepared sawiq, which is food for the pilgrims, and fed them. Then after his death, they went beyond bounds with regards to his grave and ended up worshipping him besides Allah. And in this is a warning from going beyond bounds with regards to the graves. This includes not decorating them or putting things above them, tombstones, etc., or writing on them. Additionally, in order to stop them being worshipped besides Allah, the Prophet ﷺ ordered the one he was sending on a mission, which is Ali radiallahu anhu, to travel to level the ground any elevated grave he came across. It's a Muslim.
This is mentioned again. This hadith was mentioned again, isn't it, before? No. Alright. Ibn Jarir is the Imam al-Hafiz Ibn Jarir ibn Yazid al-Tabari, the one who is the author of the tafsir and the tarikh and the ahkam and others. His tafsir is one of the great tafsirs, and it is actually to be regarded as one of the reference for so many mufassirun, so many interpreters. Yes, it's got lots of ahadith which is not authentic, lots of athar which is not authentic, but he is a person who wanted to gather all the athar regarding the verses. Right, so we find it that the Imam al-Tabari rahimahullah, that he had brought some athar that some of the, even if you remember, some of the brothers had used it to say that Imam al-Tabari is mu'awwil, making ta'wil, but actually he's not. Imam al-Tabari is bringing those athar to say that those athar that I have found, maybe he made, I would say, falling short to indicate whether he thinks is right or wrong, but he did not have the time to go into them. So he made them, but he did not say, I'm only narrating the authentic. You have to always check when any person who's making a book, does he give a condition upon himself that is, I'm only narrating which is authentic? And that person, is he highly calibrated to say that? Is he highly qualified to make sure that whatever he's narrating is authentic? You can't really take from anybody. So Imam al-Tabari, like Imam ibn Kathir, both of them are muhaddithun. Imam ibn Kathir rahmatullahi alayhi, also he's muhaddith. He had brought in his book, Tafsir ibn Kathir, Tafsir al-Quran Azim, this is the name of it, some ahadith which is not authentic. So this hadith, we find it. So Imam al-Tabari, like Imam ibn Kathir, he brought in his book Isra'iliyat. Isra'iliyat means the narrations which are from the books of the Jews and the books of the Christians. And it is one of those ma'akhif, one of those mistakes that scholars spoke about regarding this great tafsir of Ibn Kathir. That in it there is what? A hadith and athar which is not authentic. One of the brothers, he sent me a question by sending me a piece of thing that is from Tafsir ibn Kathir regarding a narration which is to do with what we have discussed last week, that is not to take, and this week as well, that is not to go overboard regarding any righteous person, not to take the grave of any person, whether he's a prophet or not, to be something that is extra, and then we will do something extra because it will lead to shirk. He brought a story, Imam ibn Kathir, he just sent me that. That is to say that I've discussed with a brother, and this person sent me this. That is a story of Al-Utaybi. I don't think anybody knows him, because I don't know him myself. The scholar did not know him. And this man, he had brought a story from this A'rabi man, Bedouin man, that he was making a sin, and then he couldn't find any place to go and seek forgiveness except for the grave of the Prophet of Allah. So he went to the top of the grave, and he rolled himself onto the grave, and he asked for forgiveness. Right? Ibn Kathir, he did not bring that chain for that. He didn't bring it. That's why we said this is from the Ma'akhir, when the mistakes that Ibn Kathir had done it, and he just brought it there. He said Al-Qissa al-Mashhura, the well-known story, which is that Al-Utbi had made, Al-Utbi who had brought it. And it got no narration, and actually when you look at the narration, or you got no change in narrators, when you look at it and you trace it, it's been narrated by Imam al-Bayhaqi, and it is totally corrupted in this narration. Al-Imam Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah had spoke about it in At-Tawassul wal-Wasila in his book, and he had denied it. The Shaykh ibn al-Qayyim had said regarding this issue, he denied it. And all the scholars they said this is one of the mistakes of Ibn Kathir. They put it there without saying nothing about it, did not elaborate. Now, brothers, I'm not really concerned about that the story is wrong or not wrong. I'm concerned about you and myself. Is our aqidah built on wishy-washy, or is our aqidah built upon stones? I want to understand. So every person brings me a shubha, they're going to be, brought me this. See, first of all, your Quran. وَمَا أَنْتَ بِمُسْمِعٍ مَنْ فِي الْقُبُورِ. You're not going to make the people in there to listen to your anything. So I know that from the Quran, and I know from the Sunnah, that a Prophet of Allah, he taught that Quran, Ibn Abbas. إِذَا سَأَلْتَ فَاسْأَلِ اللَّهِ. If you ask, only ask Allah. إِذَا اسْتَعَنْتَ فَاسْتَعِنْ بِاللَّهِ. And then this man who done all this Bedouin man, he thought it even not in the time of the Prophet. It was well after the companions. This man comes into the grave and asks the forgiveness from the grave, from the Prophet of Allah, and then that will waive my aqidah? My aqidah is really strong and solid. So I should not be, because Ibn Kathir brought it. Or Ibn Kathir brought it, but he never said, I brought only the authentic. Ibn Kathir never said that. Ibn Kathir, even if he made a hadith and he put the narrators there, then he had set himself free from anything, because he said, I put the narrators, it is upon you to discuss whether it's authentic or not. But he did not put anything about that story. Nothing. And yet this story has become famous. Becoming famous doesn't mean authentic. We have a hadith which is unauthentic. They're very, very famous. اطلبوا العلم ولو في الصين. Who's an Arab here? Have you heard about this hadith? Yeah. Who's an Arab here, please? An Arab, no, only Arab. سمعت الحديث؟ سمعت. See, look, very, very well known. So this hadith, cheek knowledge, or even is in China. This is made by Chinese. Made by China. Chinese hadith is it? You've heard it as well? Oh, sorry. So it's become now in Arabic.
Greek knowledge, even if you have to go to China.
Well, why is it Chinese knowledge there in China? Allah understand. So I'm just saying, being famous story doesn't mean. So I'm just asking the brothers, is your aqidah going to be just like this? Any person in Shawwah, I don't know this. Yeah, they make mistakes. Didn't the companions make mistakes? Didn't they ask the Prophet of Allah about the tree that we have studied in this book? Now, we are teaching this book. I don't know why we're teaching this book for. If we're aqidah like that. That we heard that the companions, they asked the Prophet of Allah about that tree. Ij'al lana dhata amwat. Make us that tree to be worshipped, like these people to be worshipped. Those are companions. Did they make a mistake or not? So they made a mistake. A scholar does not make a mistake. Everybody makes a mistake. Yeah. All the scholars make mistakes. But we hope that this mistake is within the hadith of the Prophet of Allah. إِذَا اجْتَهَدَ الْحَاكِمْ. If he makes an ijtihad, if he's wrong, he will be what? Rewarded. Regardless whether he's mistaken or not, but he will be rewarded all the time. But if he's correct, then he will get double reward. So I want to understand, where is our aqidah from this? So when فَإِذَا سَأَلْتَ فَاسْأَلِ اللَّهِ. So this is a narration. We don't know the authenticity, but it's not authentic. And it's about a man, we don't know who it is. We don't know the man who's Utbi, we don't know who is even the man who's a Bedouin man, we don't know anything. Where are the companions? Where is Aisha? Aisha radiallahu anha, wasn't she in the house where the Prophet of Allah died? Okay. Wasn't she next to the grave of the Prophet of Allah in that room? She was next to it, isn't it? She lived her life next to that. The room was closed, but she's lived. So if every time she makes a mistake, when she made a mistake, she realized she made a mistake. When she had gone to support, Az-Zubayr and Talha. And she went out and she told Abdullah, why didn't you stop me? He said, well, I've got two men on top of you, I couldn't do anything. It means on top of that is all the time, they are bigger than me and they are telling you to go. I was going to tell you to go, but not to go, but you went. She said, I made a mistake that I don't want to be buried. She wanted to be buried there with them, with her father and Umar and the Prophet. But she said, I made a mistake. I don't deserve to be there. So she was crying all the time until her khimar, until her niqab, her burqa, until what? Is being drenched with dumu'a. حتى تبل خمارها. Always with the... Couldn't she just go to the grave and ask forgiveness from the Prophet of Allah? She would have done it. That's it, end of story. So I don't want you every time you find something from somebody, oh, I want to solve it. No, ya akhi, put it in the bin. Put it in the bin and don't waste your time with other types of people. Our aqeedah is built upon much stronger than this. Not a story like that and a story like this. And by the way, this story we will discuss it when we come to the Shafa'ah. It's in this book. We will come to it. But as I said, number one, it's unauthentic. Number two, opposite the companions what they do. Number three, that the scholars make mistakes. Yeah, like the companions make mistakes. And number four, as I said, we are not people who are just listening to everybody. Our aqeedah is strong. So anything that opposes your solid things, you have to say, that's unauthentic. Or he made a mistake, because your aqeedah is strong. Nobody's going to come to it and they say to you, there is this hadith, talk about this issue of, no, these are principles. I cannot go and discuss something which is to do with my aqeedah regarding that. I can't take a grave, regardless who is in the grave, as a person, or as an idol, or as a person to ask for him intercession or forgiveness. No way. I hope that this inshallah will give you some sort of strength in your iman and makes you solid against the shubuhat that come from everywhere. Allah musta'an, ya akhi. Ibn Kathir and others make a mistake. So Imam Al-Tabari, remember the last person who had come here, alhamdulillah, the brother, who I told him, asked the question, he sent me his message, he said, alhamdulillah, now my heart is settled. Then my heart, alhamdulillah, now is settled. He felt happy. But how many times am I going to make him happy? So I made him happy. We're going to get another shubhat. I'm going to make it, it's endless. What are you going to do? Stop listening. Don't listen to the bid'ah. If there is something that there which opposes the principles, it's either not authentic or it's either that this person had made a mistake. And everybody makes a mistake. We are abiding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the worship with himself, the Prophet, and the companions, nobody else. Even if one companion made something, had been opposed by, let's say a companion had done it. Do we follow that companion? No, we follow, the companion's made a mistake. So, for example, Talha, he was eating hail while it was rain, fasting Ramadan, licking hail. Why are you licking hail? It does not break the fast. It's barakah from Allah. Do you want to follow it? Jabir ibn Samurah used to sell alcohol. Then sell alcohol. Radiallahu anhu wa Allah. Then sell alcohol. So, yes, he used to sell alcohol. Jabir ibn Samurah used to sell alcohol. He never heard that the Prophet of Allah, he had cursed them because he thought only drinking is haram. He never thought of selling alcohol is haram. So he makes a mistake. So companions, they do make mistakes. With lots of companions, there are countless. Mistake, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, all these people who made a coup, they make a mistake or not? Yes. But the consensus of the companions is infallible. When they have consensus, that's infallible. But as mistakes, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody. As for the prophets, even they do a small what? Small mistakes. Like the Prophet of Allah so made a mistake when he turned his eye away from the blind man. عَبَسَ وَتَوَلَّى أَنْ جَاءَهُ الْأَعْمَى. An ayah we recited until today. He made a mistake. But they don't make major mistakes. They are infallible regarding this. And even that mistakes are small ones that they will be corrected by Allah the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right, coming back now to Imam Al-Tabari rahmatullahi alayhi. Imam Al-Tabari, as I said, a great Imam, he's been affected by a Shari'i Amawi, Al-Umawi, because at that time. So he was affected by the politics at that time as well. But the Imam is a great Imam. He has brought some of the hadith which are very good. Some of them there, they've been put in case, if they are not authentic, in case that somebody of the scholars found the same hadith but from a different chain of narrators, then they will become what? Stronger. So he put it there as well, for the sake of that. So Al-Imam Al-Tabari, he is mujtahid, faqih, muhaddith, rahmatullahi alayh. Right, we don't really warn against his tafsir. We say Ibn Khuzaymah, he had said, I don't know anybody on the face of the earth who is more than Ibn Jarir, rahmatullahi alayh. And he was from the mujtahideen. So Ibn Khuzaymah, he gives his verdict regarding Al-Imam Al-Tabari. Ibn Jarir Al-Tabari, he's one of the mujtahideen. And he does not follow or blind follow anybody else. And there he's got as well followers that they are taking fiqh upon his madhab. Rahmatullahi alayhi. Right. We're coming now to, he says, قال ابن جرير عن سنده عن سفيان الظاهر. He is Sufyan ibn Sa'id ibn Masruq al-Thawri. He is a fiqh, rahmatullahi alayh. عن Mansur ibn Mu'tamir, and he is also a trustworthy. He says عن Mujahid. Mujahid is the student of Abdullah ibn Abbas, who had recited the Quran interpretation more than 20 times in front of Abdullah ibn Abbas, rahmatullahi alayh. So he's a great mufassir as well. Right, so he says that أَفَرَأَيْتُمُ اللَّاتَ وَالْعُزَّى. This is the verse in Surah Al-Najm, number 19. أَفَرَأَيْتُمُ. This ayah is being said after what happens regarding the mighty, miraculous journey of the Prophet of Allah to the heavens, which is recorded at Isra wal Mi'raj. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had shown the Prophet ﷺ great signs. لَقَدْ رَأَى مِنْ آيَاتِ رَبِّهِ كُبْرًا. He has seen from the signs of his Lord, which are major signs. Like for example, he had seen the lift itself. He had seen the buraq as well. The buraq is not faster than the lift. The buraq is not faster than the lift. The buraq is an earthly animal. So whatever is to do with his miraculous, that his stride is as far as he can see, it is only for the earth. What is to do with the lift, that lift is to do with the space measurement. Much more than faster than the buraq. So he had seen that buraq and he had seen the lift, which is in part of the night, he is outside the universe, outside something that we don't know, second heaven, third heaven, fourth heaven, up all the way until he reached Sidrat al-Muntaha. Jibreel couldn't forward. He couldn't go forward. Until he got so close to the Lawh al-Mahfuz, preserved tablets. And he could hear the pens of the angels who are taken from the preserved tablets. And he had seen the Jannah. So the Prophet ﷺ, he had seen great signs from that. So Allah said, in terms of mockery to those people who are worshipping idols, أَفَرَأَيْتُمُ اللَّاتَ وَالْعُزَّى. Means, what is the comparison between your Lat and Uzza and between these great major signs that the Prophet of Allah had seen on the night of Isra wal Mi'raj? That's what it means. So Al-Lat either means Al-Ilah, or Al-Lat means the ones who are Yarittu As-Sawiq, the one who is making a paste from dates for the pilgrims. A man who used to be a righteous man used to make the sawiq to the Hujjaj, and when he died they made a grave upon him, and that grave became a god. And how they started, that they started coming to the grave and making i'tikaf, sitting around there with some sort of sign of grief and sorrow, and then later on it developed into some sort of rituals, and then after that they worshipped it, and it became one of the gods. What amazes Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, he said, look at these people, kuffar, at that time before Islam, they used to be so kind to the people who are pilgrims. They give them water for free, they give them as well sawiq for free, which is, alhamdulillah, these days are okay in Saudi Arabia, but some of them now they're selling what? Zamzam water. How can you sell Zamzam water, ya habibi, next to Zamzam? Allah musta'an. At the time of the kuffar, they give you Zamzam, they give you everything for free. Alhamdulillah, there are lots of it. When you go in there, you find lots of people offering things free. Alhamdulillah, it's there. And I'm saying there are people as well which are doing something not suitable to their reputation and the history of that place. Right. So Abu al-Jawza here, Aws ibn Abdullah al-Rib'i, he said, قال البخاري عن ابن عباس كان يلت السويق للحاج. That is the interpretation of that. Right, go ahead.
Let's finish chapter.
Finish the chapter? Okay, sorry. Let me just, because there's more. You don't have any more? Graves. What is it here?
This is Surah Tawbah, 28.
I don't understand that. You check from the... Okay. No, it's hadith. I don't know why hadith of Ibn Abbas. I don't understand why he's done this. I don't know. Okay. So this is from the Matan.
We did write Ibn Abbas.
No, about the... Not Sawiq. The visitors of the grave, the women visiting the graves. Okay, we'll talk about that. Right, okay. I'm sorry that this book has actually failed in narrating, not even Ibn Uthaymeen, even Al-Wahhaab. Right. Here we find Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma means him and his father. لعن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم زائرات القبور والمتخذين عليها المساجد والسرج. Allah's Messenger had supplicated for a curse from Allah Azza wa Jal upon, when there's a supplication of a curse, that means whatever is coming after that is a major sin. زائرات القبور, that is the women who visit the graves, and متخذين عليها المساجد, and also the ones who take upon the graves places of worship, masajid, and a suruj means lanterns, light. You know that these people, they put in the graves of these days like a candle on top of that. Right. This hadith, first of all, is unauthentic, and this is very important to document this. The hadith which is authentic is the following. Instead of za'irat, zawarat. If you want further discussion of this, go no further than the book of Shaykh al-Albani, Ahkam al-Janaiz. And why I'm saying this is very important. The word za'irat and zawarat. Za'irat means the women who visit the graves. Zawarat, the women who increase in the visit of the graves. And there's a huge difference between them. So the first one, za'irat, which is unauthentic, that means prohibition for the women to visit the grave. Then that's why Saudi Arabia, they prohibit any women to enter the baqiyah. Yes? They're not allowed. And zawarat, it means, no, the ones who visit frequently. That's the difference between the two narrations. And as I said, there's a huge difference. That means, if she visits, normally, no problem. But if she keeps visiting the grave, like, for example, every week or every day, or so her husband, where are you going? I'm going to visit the graves. That's not right. So visiting the graves should be what? Very rare, but not frequently for the women. That is the difference between the two. So let's discuss this hadith. La'an Allah. When Allah's Messenger makes a curse, calls it on a curse, that means he's expelling them from the mercy of Allah. If you expel from the mercy of Allah, that means it's a major sin. لعن الله من غير أنهار الأرض لعن الله من آوى محدثا لعن Allah Messenger had asked and made a curse. Remember the hadith before it. لعن الله اليهود والنصارى اتخذوا قبور أنبيائهم مساجد. Lots of hadith where the Prophet of Allah said, may Allah have curse upon this. It means Allah's curse upon, or may Allah have curse upon. Whether Allah's curse is upon or Allah's Messenger is asking for Allah's curse to be upon, both of them is to be correct. But the what which is stronger is that the Prophet of Allah is asking Allah to send the curse upon these people. That's even plus. Curse plus. Do you understand what I'm saying? Prophet is asking Allah to send the curse upon these people, and that is a major sin. Straight away. Za'irat, what we said, is not right, and upon which the other Mashayikh, Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, had built their fiqh on that word, which is, if the word is not right, the whole building will be what? Collapsed. So there is no negotiation here. So, Prophet of Allah said, Zawarat. Al-Mukthirna min az-ziyar. Because in the other hadith, الَّذِينَ اللَّوَاتِ أو اللَّاتِ يُكْثِرْنَ مِنَ الزِّيَارَ. The ones who increase in visiting the graves. We're saying this, may Allah curse, Da'ir al-Qubur, because the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in number of ahadith, he had said, first of all, إِنَّمَا النِّسَاءُ شَقَائِقُ الرِّجَالِ. Verily, the women are equal to the men. So the women are equal to the men in terms of hukum implementation. So when the Allah's Messenger says, "O men, women are what? Included." Without any proof. Okay? But if Allah had commanded the women, then men are not included until there is a qarina. Then what? Proof. So when the Prophet of Allah addresses the women, it's only the women, not the men. But And the male will not go into that until there is a qarina. Qarina means like a proof. But if Allah's Messenger had said, or Allah has addressed the men, then the women are included. Always. So regarding the prayer, we said there is no difference between men and women when they pray. إِنَّمَا النِّسَاءُ شَقَائِقُ الرِّجَالِ. Whether they're in the prostration or the bowing or the, all of that the same. And we find also that in that the Prophet of Allah, he said, أَلَا إِنِّي قَدْ نَهَيْتُكُمْ عَنْ زِيَارَةِ الْقُبُورِ. Verily, I have prohibited you from visiting the graves. At the time when Islam came, lots of idol worshippers were stemmed from worshipping the graves. So the Prophet of Allah, when Islam came, he said to the companions not to go to the graveyards, because their aqeedah is not strong enough yet. And most of it, as I said, from the shirk, which had come out from or emerged from the graves. Kuffar used to go to the graves in certain times, and they make certain worships and certain rituals. That is why the Prophet of Allah prohibited them. But later on he said, أَلَا إِنِّي قَدْ نَهَيْتُكُمْ عَنْ زِيَارَةِ. I have prohibited you from visiting the grave, now visit it. Why is it so important to say these words? Because as a principles we have learned from the usul al-fiqh, which is a deep fiqh, that is, when we have a prohibition of something, then it being preceded by what? By something which was lawful. So Islam, when it came, he had shaped lots of things and made it what? Some of it prohibited. Do you understand? But if it was prohibited by Islam and then later on want to make it lawful, then there will be a clear statement from Allah or from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, because the visiting of the graves, at the beginning it was allowed before Islam. Islam came and he said, it's not allowed. Yes? Now Islam wants to make it what? Allowed. If he did not say, أَلَا إِنِّي قَدْ نَزْهَيْتُكُمْ, if he did not say the Prophet of Allah, verily I prohibit you from visiting the grave, now visit it. If he just said, visit the graves, we don't know. Was the visiting of the grave was before the prohibition of visiting the grave or not? And we'll say which one is nasikh, which one is mansukh, which one is abrogating, which one is not abrogated. You understand that? Because if we left like this, we will always say no, the prohibition abrogates the lawful, so we'll not visit the graves. But because of the word of the Prophet of Allah, we know that, Islam prohibited it at the beginning, and then he made it what? Lawful. How he made it lawful? Because the aqeedah was strong in the hearts of the companions. The Prophet of Allah knew that the Muslims now are immunized against making shirk with the graves. So he said, visit the graves. So this is a general saying. Now, what is the theme of visiting the graves? تُذَكِّرُكُمْ بِالْآخِرَةِ. It will remind you of the what? Is the reminding of the hereafter just limited to men? Or men and women? Women and men. Actually, I would say women needs more reminding than the men. Because the Prophet of Allah said, يُكْثِرْنَ اللَّعْنِ وَالْقِيلَ وَالْقَالِ. They are increasing the curse and always gossiping. So they need to remind themselves. So the men and the women are there. And that is the understanding of Aisha radiallahu anha. And Aisha was the most closest person to the Prophet ﷺ. Aisha, after the death of the Prophet of Allah, she was seen to visit her grave, the grave of her brother, Abdul Rahman. When she paid a visit, one of the followers, he said, Ya al-Mu'mineen, oh, mother of the believers, did the Prophet of Allah prohibit us from visiting the grave? You know what's prohibited? Us, I mean men or women. She said, yes, he prohibited us in the beginning. But now he made it what? Lawful. It is not prohibited us, that means you, the women. No. Because if it was the women, she would not say, yes, he prohibited us at the beginning. There's no understanding of that. Prohibited us at the beginning, that means men and women. And then he made it lawful to us. And also the Prophet ﷺ, one night, he left Aisha and he went to the grave. So she woke up in the night, she didn't find him there. She thought that he's with other women, with other wives. So she left the house to look for him. And she followed him until she reached the Baqiyah. Baqiyah is not far away from her, Masjid of the Prophet. And that was really dark. There's no light, there's no electricity that time. Very dark. She saw him there. And he was making dua. To do what? To the graves. And then she ran towards the house. When you run, you've got to be out of breath. So Prophet of Allah came, and her breath, Aisha. So Prophet of Allah came to the bed. Aisha, your shaitan came to you. What does the shaitan tell her? That the Prophet of Allah is what? Another woman. With the other wives. Do you think Allah and His Messenger will deceive you? Do you think Allah and Messenger will betray you, O Aisha? No, we will not betray you. أَتَظُنِّينَ اللَّهَ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ وَرَسُولَهُ يَخُونَانِكِ No. There's no khiyana, there's no treachery. So, Prophet of Allah, he understood the jealousy of Aisha radiallahu anha wa Allah. She's jealous. So, here, Aisha, she visited the grave. She went to the what? To the graveyard. If it was not allowed, he would have told the Prophet of Allah, why did you follow me? Didn't you know that the graveyard is haram for the women? Number 3, Prophet ﷺ also, when he was with Aisha and he was in the graveyard, she asked him, Aisha, she said, Messenger of Allah, if I to visit the graveyard, what should I say? And the ones who say this is not, how do they tackle this? The other scholars who say this is not allowed, they say no, that the women, when they pass by it, not when they enter it. That is really, it's a very weak way of refuting that argument. Do you understand that? They said it's only when she passes by it, not to visit it, not to go inside. To pass by it, not to visit. If you're passing by the graveyard and you're not intended to go to the graveyard, there is no dua. So if you are, for example, your house is next to a graveyard and every time you're going to go to work, you're going to make the dua, it's going to be a headache. Do you understand that? The dua is for the visit in the graveyard. Not every time because the street is next to the graveyard. So lots of graveyards in the Muslim year. So every time I'm passing by, not the intention of what? Or visiting the grave, or not even knowing there's a graveyard there. So the Prophet ﷺ, he taught her that when you come to the graveyard, when you enter the graveyard, say Assalamu alaikum ahla diyar min al-mu'minina wal-muslimin wa inna inshallah bikum lahiqun nasallallahu lana wa lakum al-afiyah. And now these days, passing by the graveyard, you could pass by second like that. How are you going to be making the dua that passes, in the car? That's less than a second. How can you say, you can't say that. By the time you're going to start your dua, you're already about a mile away. That's Allah, they're gone. The graveyard's gone. So it is to enter the graveyard, not to quickly like this next to the graveyard. But I'll round it up now. Last thing, which is al-muttakhidina alayha al-masajid. The one who took the masajid on top of it. Masajid, that means we said, either they built the masjid on top of the grave, or they make the person to be buried in the masjid. Both of them is to be under the curse of the Prophet ﷺ, under the curse of Allah Azza wa Jalla. And also, the ones who take the suraj. Suraj means light, lanterns. And taking the lanterns, there is the following prohibition, or the following things which are disadvantages. Number 1, it's a bid'ah. Prophet of Allah did not do it, companion not do it. Number 2, waste of money. Why do we even put lights there in the graveyard? What? The grave, the dead people want to see each other, for example. The dead people want to walk. They give them light, it's spooky, So it's waste of light. Number 3, it is emulation of the Majus, the Magians. You are emulating the Majus. You are actually imitating them. Majus means the fire worship. They do that. And also, it will, number 4, it will lead to the ghulu, which is extremism. And the 5th one, it might lead to also to belittle them. So we've got 5 disadvantages when we make this called light. Number 1, we said the bid'ah. It's a bid'ah. Number 2, we said it is a waste of money. Number 3, we said it is emulation of the Majus. Number 4, it is going to be leading to the ghulu, extremism that will take the graves of the worship, or the worshiping of the grave. Number 5, it might lead to disrespect them. How? You know that the Rafidah, You know, the best place for them is the shrines in the graveyard. You see them in the images. They take their hookah pipe or hubbly bubbly, have a picnic. Some of them is prostrated to a grave, and some of them sitting on the grave and eating chocolate, and some of them even smoking cigarettes on top of the grave. Allahu Musta'an. Do you understand? All of them, because there was no light. I don't think these people will go to the graveyard. Ooh, we'll be scared. So the light is supposed to be only if I need to bury somebody. So you bring the light, like the baqiyah. You see the baqiyah, mashallah? And they bury the Isha or they bring the Fajr prayer. They go and bring the light just for the sake of that grave and bury the person. But to make a light like this, lamp posts and lights, that's not right. And that's why, alhamdulillah, the scholars are holding ground, mashallah. Yet that bid'ah hasn't happened, because it will lead later to what? Shirk. It will lead to shirk. And the best of the graves you could see is al-baqiyah. So simple. And the baqiyah, by the way, has been changed so many times. So many times. But don't you ever think that, for example, that area is for Sahaba, and that area, it's been changed so many times. It's been said. So there's no way that you will know which is grave and which is that grave. Because people will take them as well as worshipping, or some people will take them as a curse. You know what the Prophet will say? Hafsa, Aisha, and Abu Bakr and Umar, all of them in the hellfire. Right, we'll stop here, inshallah. The far in the next chapter. Yeah, we haven't finished the chapter. We haven't finished the chapter yet.
So wait, I was surprised. It's 1.5, 3 lines. It's the whole chapter.
Huh?
And the book is just...
Yeah, inshallah. We'll do the issues, inshallah, next week. If you have any questions, please go ahead, because we're only 5 minutes have to go. Now.
Clarification, you mentioned not to use Yara on the Prophet's graves. So, and you know, the Islam reaches the Prophet wherever we are. So, is it correct that when you queue up to pass salutations to the Prophet?
No, it's correct to go and pass salutation, but he said the word used ziyarat qabr Rasul sallam. You should say ziyarat Masjid of the Prophet. When you say ziyarat qabr Rasul, that means it links to the mind the implementation of bid'ah. So we go to pass salutation. As soon as we go to the Masjid of the Prophet, we pray there, and then after the prayer, we go not to visit, we go to pay salutation upon the Prophet. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. There is no need as well to add lots of things in Ya Habib, Ya Assalamu alaikum, Ya Rasulullah. That's it. And you go backwards, and then you even make dua towards him, all of that shirk. Allah understand. Now, Tadal.
Also, the salutation to the Prophet is just different from when you're away from the grave to that being close to the grave.
Very good. Passing the salutation upon the Prophet is it different from the way that you are passing salutation upon here? Yes, it's different. Because we don't say Assalamu alaikum ya Rasulullah when we are away. Because the Prophet is not in front of you, is he? But when we are here, we say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim, which is the long version. Or Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So this is the salutation. But passing the salam is different. You say Assalamu alayka ya Abu Bakr, Assalamu alayka ya Umar. After that, pass peace be upon you, because you're talking to the grave itself. They will not be able to hear you. Those Abu Bakr and Umar will not. Even the Prophet of Allah will not be able to hear you. It's actually the salutation will be carried from you by an angel given to the Prophet of Allah in a way which is not to do with lifetime. It's with life. It's to do with barzakh. No. So he can't hear you. So all the prophets and all the believers are worshipping Allah in their graves. They're making salah. The difference between a prophet and a non-prophet is the prophet, his flesh is intact, not being decomposed. Whereas the other ones will be taken away. Except from Allah as a will for him as a martyr or something that he wanted to preserve him. But all the prophets, but in terms of barzakh life, all of the same barzakh. The prophets are praying in their graves. Praying in their graves. So the prophet is not really having a hearing. Because if he's hearing, that's when the people say, oh, carry my salutation when you are there. They think that he hears. No, he does not hear. yours, when you are next to the Prophet, make a salutation, and mine at the moment here, they reach the Prophet at the same time. Now, there is no salutation upon the deceased in fashion. The graveyard is all of it. Assalamu alaikum, ahl al-diyar, Jannah. When you go to the grave of yours, you don't say salutation to him. You say what? Assalamu alaikum, and also you make dua. Oh Allah, forgive him. Oh Allah. You make dua to him. Okay? Tafadhal.
If you have a graveyard of Christians nearby, that graveyard might be better is also alright.
If it's graveyard of Christian, yeah. No, but to visit the graveyard, the grave of a person who is irrelative. But to go and visit the graveyards like this, no, we don't want to go and make a visit to the graveyard, because there are lots of statues and lots of things that will make you to curse, and it will make your heart even harder. But if you pass by a grave of a disbeliever, you say, Basharak Allahu bina. You know that. But if you have a relative, a mother or a father, those people who are, okay, then you pay them. We did not see from the companions taking the Prophet ﷺ's visit to his mother, that they used to visit their relatives who died upon kufr. We have lots. Ali ibn Abi Talib hasn't been documented that he used to visit the father of his. But it is permissible. When I say it's not permissible, but don't take it as a sunnah, okay? Because you might deceive other people. You don't know what people they think when you go to the graveyards. Look at the sheikh. They go into the such and such graveyards. Either they're going to be make rumors against you, or they're going to follow you and they do the same thing. And if you are doing it for consideration, they're not doing it for consideration. So you have to bear in mind these issues. But I'm just saying, when the Prophet said, "Ala fazuruha," it is for non-Muslim and Muslims. The non-Muslims for specific people, like the Prophet of Allah. He did not go to the grave of the kuffar, the mushrikeen, but he went to his mother.
So we know there are acts and elements of shirk in this visiting the grave of Prophet and a bit of extra respect to people who are ignorant. The dua that Prophet did, that don't make my grave as an idol. How do we reconcile this?
There's no reconciliation. There's no conflict to reconcile. If the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Don't make my grave to be taken as an idol to be worshipped." An idol, that means itself, as in where it is. It's not being taken out because they can't see it here. And it's being protected until Allah wills. But in terms of taking it as I said before in my talk, I don't know if you were listening, as worship, like they say, Ya Allah, Ya Muhammad, now these days here, that's not being in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Prophet of Allah, he said, Wathan, means this grave of his, as for himself, people, they worship Muhammad wherever they are. But in terms of the grave, لا تجعل قبري وثنا يعبد. And also another hadith, قبري عيدا, place to be, come to it on a certain days, certain times, like the mushrikeen used to do. And that was what protected. So, alhamdulillah, that is the case. But as I said, Muslims are calling themselves Muslims, and they're putting Ya Allah and Muhammad. They're asking in the name of Muhammad. They're asking even the name of people who are less than Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in the name of the Jilani, the brothers who are in the Brahwis. Okay, we call them brothers because they're brothers in Islam in general. But in terms of some of those people who know what they're doing something that will take them outside the fold of Islam. So when they say, for example, Hazar Nazar, you don't heard about this aqid, Hazar Nazar. They believe that the Prophet of Allah is alive. But if you said the Prophet died, he says, Astaghfirullah. وَإِنَّكَ مَيْتٌ وَإِنَّهُمْ مَيْتٌ إِنَّكَ مَيْتٌ وَإِنَّهُمْ مَيْتٌ. Allah he said, فَإِنَّكَ مَيْتٌ, that you're going to die and they're going to die. So, Astaghfirullah to Allah. Because Allah has made it wrong that He made us the Prophet of Allah died. For them, the Prophet of Allah is not dead. For them, he is alive, proper life. And that is why, when they, for example, make Hazran, Allahu Allah. They make a chair empty because they believe that chair is profitable. Some of them go to extreme. Saudi Arabian man, alhamdulillah, he's been arrested in Saudi Arabia straight away. He was in another country like Kazakhstan, and all these people who are the believers in, such things and Sufism. He went there in front of them and he was saying, that day, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he was with us. You remember you saw him? He was talking, I saw him. And he was giving us recommendations. So he got some liars to support him. I don't know if you heard that, have you seen that or not? So alhamdulillah, he's been arrested. As soon as he came to Saudi Arabia, the WhatsApp got him red-handed. So he said, and we sitting to him when we sitting together, and mashallah, we're talking, chit-chatting with the Prophet of Allah. And he wants to confirm with the other person, did you see him? Yeah, I was with him. You remember when he was there? Yeah. They're lying to each other, subhanAllah. So the Arabian got him and said, can we just see the Prophet that you have seen? We want to have a glimpse. Allah, these people. Allah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik.